Okay, my friends, so excited to be here. And I've got Noelle Satisfies Souls on the podcast today. And she is a worthiness and trauma release coach who uses EFT in her practice. And today we're going to be talking all things EFT and what is it? Why would we want to use it? How does it help us? All the things. So, first and foremost, Noelle, thank you for coming, sharing your time and your knowledge with us.
Thank you, Erin. This is so exciting.
So, let's start off with what is EFT? And let's just dive in, tell us all the things.
EFT, I would say, is a newer therapeutic practice coming on the scene, but it's actually been around since that is newer, 1990.
Okay.
In the realm of therapy, it is newer. And it's more of like an energetic modality using acupressure points, similar to acupuncture in that way. So basically, we are activating certain points in the body that line up with energy hotspots in the body to get some sort of relief. So it's amazing for anxiety, stress, depression. It's huge for weight loss these days, and for healing purposes is how I use it the most. And I think it's most beneficial because what we are doing with EFT or tapping is really trying to change belief and behavior.
Mm.
So,
And I don't know if you said this, and maybe I was, but did we talk about what EFT stands for?
mm,
What is
so
it? Yeah.
EFT stands for Emotional Freedom Technique.
Okay.
And the technique is literally tapping on the different hotspots, which is why we will just say tapping,
Yeah.
Um, Go ahead. Did you have a follow-up question?
I was going to say, so for the listeners, and if you're watching on YouTube, actually show us, you and I've had a session and we tapped just with my fingers tapping like this, right? And I've also tapped before. And then if you want to share and show the listeners,
Yeah.
where are those and why are they there? And kind of just break it down from the science standpoint of why do we tap in these areas? And then, yeah.
So in the body, energetically speaking, we do have those meridians or energy hotspots. It's where a lot of our biological, physiological circuitry runs through. So our veins, arteries, lymph system, they run along the same lines. But on an energetic or maybe spiritual level, we also have lines of energy running in the same pattern.
Mm.
And so when you bridge all those different parts of us together, we just notice that correlation, that it's just this one large system of wiring. And so that is what we're trying to activate with the tapping. So, like you mentioned, Erin, we do it like this,
Yep.
just having the motion concentrated in the fingertips. But then there's also what we would call body tapping. So you're tapping on different spots, and those are going to be the energy hotspots. The concentration of energy is running through the meridian. And so there's kind of like a gamut of areas that you would run through. And what we're doing is we're really trying to hit the concentration areas of energy. So if something happens to us, we experience some kind of event that was unsavory, there are different parts of our system experiencing it. And on an energetic level, what is happening is that it causes build up in an area. So the energy is no longer flowing. And there are different modalities to help restart the flow of energy, and tapping
Yeah.
is one of them. But what's interesting, this is happening on a physical level also. So there's a huge correlation between, let's say, IBS symptoms,
Mm-hmm.
IBS symptoms,
Yeah.
and past or childhood trauma.
Hmm.
And so people don't know these correlations where it's our entire systems being affected in different ways. But when you really look and line them up, there is that patterning.
Yeah.
So I forgot where I started. Where did I start with this?
Just one, like, is the showing, like, when you say
Oh,
meridians, and
yes.
then go ahead, and then where actually do we tap? Like, I think sometimes, and I always go back and compare, like, old Aaron would have been like, what is this? And I think for the understanding and the knowledge, like, if we understand something, sometimes we're more likely to, it kind of like opens, right, the doorway of like, what is this? How does it work? Like, how? And so, when you say meridians, you're also using the word energy hotspots interchangeably. And so, going back to emotions, right? Energy in motion, when we, like, energy is just constantly moving within us, right? Like, emotions is just energy. And you said, like, sometimes you're using IBS, which we could go down the whole rabbit hole of health and like
Mhm.
emotions. But
Yeah.
but the but with our emotions, not, I don't think how a lot of us understand that, like, if we don't express it, if we don't transform it, get it out, however
Mhm.
you want to say, right? Like, we repress it. Most of us repress or suppress or
Yes.
just bypass completely. That energy is still in our bodies. And so, what I hear you saying is that with the EFT,
Mhm.
tapping on those certain meridians, those points in our bodies, that allows us to almost break free that energy that has been stuck there.
Right. And so maybe bridging the gap in understanding.
Yeah.
So let's just say there's a spiritual hypothesis. There is one, but whatever your spiritual worldview is, um, if it holds space for things like past lives or layers of the body, this will be more palatable for you. But go with me; it will make sense. So this is coming from the Hindu and Vedic traditions, and we call them koshas, and koshas are layers. And so the theory is that the human being is made up of layers. And so the outermost one is going to be what we see when we look at each other, our beautiful faces, or skin, our physicality. That's the outermost. And then as you go layer in to layer in to layer in, those layers get a little bit more precious and fine.
Mhm.
And then they require different kind of handling. But the thing is, again, when something happens to us, all those layers are getting affected. And maybe it's because of the way our society is now. There's been like a lot of emphasis put on one of those layers. So you have the physical, then you're going to have a mental layer. And then in between those two, you have an energetic layer.
Mhm.
And then the other layers past the mental layer, they're getting more and more close to what we would say is divine, your
Mhm.
one, the universal oneness within us.
Mhm.
So that is a theory where that's at the center, and then there's like a layer upon a layer upon a layer going outward that make up the human being. So after the mental layer moving outward, that's more affected by earthly reality. But then as you get closer to what's divine or at the center, at the core, it
Yeah.
doesn't need as much protection from what we're experiencing in the world. So we really want to focus on the physical, the energetic, and the mental layer. But again, we put a lot of emphasis on the mental. And we know why that is. That's how we were raised, prioritizing logic and rationale. And so that, plus at the same time, we're taught less and less about our bodies, about our emotionality. And I like to think, like you were saying, do you say energy in motion, emotion? That's beautiful. That's beautiful because I think of the energetic layer as energetic slash emotional.
Yeah.
And it's also our chi layer. So everything that's happening with us, it's a difference between someone who's living and someone who's not. So you still have two human beings, but it's that essence that brings us alive. That's what's in the chi layer. So you're thinking breath, you're thinking energy, and you're thinking emotion. So because we're taught so heavily about mental capacity and prioritizing that, we attach that with safety. So if we're not taught about our other layers and everything is just about the mental layer, when something does happen to us that's um, traumatizing, we kind of associate with the mental, but we forget about the other layers, and or we are never aware that work needs to be done there. But again, when something is happening, it's happening to all those layers. So if we're doing the work of like, oh, this is something about me that I'm not liking.
Mm.
I would like to get over this behavior. Let me go seek assistance.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a modality that speaks to our mental layer.
Yeah.
Talk therapy, affirmations, even meditation, calming the mind. Those are all mental level things. And that is going to be very effective on the mental level. But because more things are happening, more things within us are being affected that are not getting dealt with, things will just get stuck and
Yeah.
stay. So because we're moving, as my spiritual guide would say, we're just moving a little chi. That's all we're doing. We're moving a little chi with the tapping. That is speaking to our emotional level. And so it's like bringing the pieces together, doing stuff to facilitate and ease whatever the mental went through or the mental iteration of the memory, things to assuage what's going on energetically. And then you also want to be doing things that help you out physically because all those layers are being affected. So we have to undo what was done across all those layers or levels.
Yeah, I love
Does that
that because because I think a lot of times people, or we're taught, like you already said, right? Like in society, it's like, oh, well, we go talk to someone, but that keeps us. And I know our head is part of our body. And
right?
also, it's very logical, rational, right? Versus what I think EFT does is it kind of bypasses the mind and it just gets you
Yeah.
straight into the body, right? And just as an example, like when Noelle and I were doing my session, and some of the things that we were working through is just like this ability to say and be exactly who I am, right? Because a lot of us, right, have been brought up with like, don't say this, act this way, right? And so that I don't want to say stuff, but that's the word that's coming to mind, like gets stuck in there. And so it's not like we're talking to the 43-year-old Erin, right? We're talking, when we're doing this work of EFT, we're talking to the 10-year-old, the 12-year-old, right? That that something occurred, an instance happened, and then that emotion was elicited, and then I call it like trapped, right? Like trapped emotions. And so maybe you can talk about that, but like it is a way to bypass the mind and then to just, it's just like a fast track, right? Like to get into the body,
Track. Yeah. Yeah.
to, to get into the body. And so, why do you want to explain, why do our emotions, and maybe this isn't the best way to explain it, but why do they get trapped?
They get trapped because we have become disconnected from our bodies. And so it goes back to that layering.
Mm-hmm.
They're meant to work together. Our mental and our physical and our emotional, those pieces are meant to work together. But how many times have we heard, let's say we're a little boy, or, you know, strong Black female syndrome, don't, you can't be weak and you can't cry, stop crying, don't
Yep.
cry.
Yep.
But and then that causes a feeling of, oh, well, there's something wrong with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
The person who loves me is telling me crying is not acceptable, and so we'll stuff that down to be accepted.
Yeah.
So we stuff it down where we don't have to deal with it, but when we're doing that, we don't get to understand what's happening, we don't get to learn the system. And so we develop, of course, a fear of what we're hiding from.
Yeah.
And we just get disconnected. It's not safe. Feeling is not safe. What if they overtake me? What if I get overwhelmed? What if I can't control? Control is a huge part of this whole thing. And when we're in our minds, we feel, okay, at least I got control. I have a good grasp on the situation. You know, I don't want to look weak and be in my body and feel, but it just has to work together. if you are an embodied human being, which is something I say often, if you're here as consciousness in a human body, you're gonna have to use it. It has to be a part, it has to be integrated for you to be healthy. So that's what the problem is that disconnects that happens. And you can tell, you're like feeling uncomfy. You're like, no, 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 I don't want to feel that. What is that? No. And so we just jump up here and we stop, like the breath gets shallower.
Yeah, I was gonna say shallower.
Shallower, okay. And it gets caught in the chest. That's Emma. Hi, Emma.
Noelle's having to babysit, and she didn't plan for it. So we're dog sitting and niece and nephew sitting right now.
Yes. But we get disassociated for safety. Yes. We do that. Yes. We want to understand, we want to control, we don't want to feel like the weak link in any capacity. So, but the system has to work together. Otherwise things get stuck. Yeah. We have to do the undoing on all the different layers. And because emotionality is linked with weakness, that's something that's shoved down and in. Yeah. Actually, the answer of the question.
Yeah. Gabor Mate talks about this. He talks about trauma, and he talks about what actually is trauma, and he defines it, and I'm paraphrasing, but he just says, it's like a disassociation. It is a betrayal of yourself to stay connected to someone, mostly your caretaker or your parent, right? And so, like you're saying, when we deny what we're feeling, like stop crying, don't be scared, stop whining, like we are denying our feelings in that moment so that we don't lose or break connection with the person, right? I mean, let's just be honest. Our parents, caretakers, it is safety, right? Like they feed us, they put roof over our head, like, and then if you go back, genetically, right? Like if you did speak out from the tribe, right? That did mean death, right? So there is in our cells, there is that survival based need to belong, to connect, because connection equals safety and food and housing and all of those things that we need, right, to survive. So
to say a little bit more about why the emotions get trapped.
Yeah.
So we're disconnecting, obviously. I've said that a million times. Sorry for the repetition. But we lose the ability to self-regulate. We forgot what that is like. Like if you just watch babies and you had one, see, let me know if this is accurate. When she would breathe, her belly would expand out first. That's how babies breathe, because that's how we naturally breathe. And it's when we go into fight, flight, or freeze that the sympathetic nervous system turns on. And when that happens, people, like everything else kind of turns off. When your sympathetic nervous system turns on, you're telling the body, alert, alert, we're in danger. It's no time to eat. There's no time to digest your food. It's no time to sleep. We just need to run or kill something. So it's all of this adrenaline, and then everything else we need to function is shut down. The thing is, though, we're in a time where we get in that state by being stuck in traffic, and we stay there the entire day. It's meant to be like a temporary state. We're supposed to switch back to rest and digest, parasympathetic, where our functioning or internal functioning turns back on, but we don't get there. And so that's what the shallowness of breath is, and all of those things, or energy is getting stuck, mind, and then like chest. And we need it to be all the way flowing up and down the center channel, your meridians. It needs to be flowing energy for anything to heal, for anything to be released.
Yeah. And so I just want to circle back too, because the sympathetic nervous system, you said this, but like I always remember like the S and the S, right? Sympathetic nervous system is our stress, right? Like that is a healthy state to be in when we need it to be there, right? Like back in the day when you were having to fight, when you were having to run. And like you already said, but most of us actually live in that state on a consistent daily basis, right? And you said it, like being in traffic, looking at your monthly, financial statement in your business, or, your credit card statement, in the from your personal standpoint, right? Like, or you're late to an event, or just there's so many things that you are living in on a consistent basis from the stress in being in the sympathetic nervous system, and you're at this elevated state all the time, and your body isn't meant to stay at that state for a consistent amount of time, right? Like you said, going back to the parasympathetic with the rest and digest, with, I would call it more like relax, right? Like it's just like when you're thinking about, when you're eating, in order for you to be able to have nourishment and food, right? Like to take in the nourishment from the food you're eating, you have to be in that state. And a lot of us stay in the opposite, right? We're in that sympathetic, stressed state the majority of the time.
Mhm. And that's where the physical aspects of the problem start showing up. Whether we connect the emotional and the physical symptoms or not, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
So we're unable, we've shut off our ability to digest food properly.
Mhm.
And this is something that builds over time, because then we have to cope with it, because life is going to continue to life when we have a tummy ache. So we do what we need to do, but it's just we build this cycle of being dependent on the behavior, the coping strategies that don't really take care of the problem. And those coping strategies keep us, again, in our head.
Yeah.
So again, everything that's in the body just gets trapped there because it's not getting enough attention. I think that was a shorter version of what we were trying to get to.
That's okay. And I want to say for those of you listening, because Aaron several years ago would have heard this podcast and would have been like going down this shame spiral of like, oh, I'm noticing what I'm doing, and then having all of this shame and guilt around what I'm doing to my body, and what I've done, and all of these things. And that isn't the goal. The goal is to bring awareness, right? To, okay, this is what I may be in, and these are the tools that I can use to help me be in a more balanced
Yeah.
state.
We have to honor that we don't know what we don't know. When we don't
Yes.
know, we have to forgive ourselves for the things we didn't know.
Yeah.
And it's a part of the healing, that
Mhm.
self-forgiveness piece. I'm like tempted to do some tapping for that right now, but we'll do it, I guess, after we talk about the methodology like you were trying to do earlier. We'll do that.
Yeah. So when, I guess that would be a good, questions that I have is like, when can we use it? How do we use it? Or how do we know when we want to use it? Like that would be a perfect example of like, if you're noticing that shame or that guilt come over you, like this is a perfect time to stop, right? And to be like, okay, because this is coming back from childhood, right? Like you did
Mhm.
something you didn't notice, you probably got in trouble for it or got reprimanded, or nobody can make us feel shame and guilt. And also people say things, and then that elicits a response and an emotion within our
Yeah.
bodies, right? And so yeah, go ahead.
When we can use it. This is a depends question,
Okay.
but by and large, it's whenever you want. So I do feel like tapping is most effective when you're pairing it with spoken word. So if you are, you know, in a conference room, I mean, we don't really do that in person anymore, I guess. So you could just be, your camera off and then you can do it. It's fine. But it is something that you want to speak while you're tapping, and we're going to get into that a little bit more. But essentially, you have it at your command whenever you need it, which is what's so great about it. This is a great way to find the C word, control. This is how we really regain control, by figuring out how to self-regulate.
Mhm.
Um, and you can do that whenever it's needed. So, did you have questions, or you want me to just keep going?
For those of us that like, I think those of us that are in the self-development world, we throw around words and we think everyone else knows those words, right? Versus when we say self-regulate, what
Mhm.
does that mean to you? Like, how do you use that word with your clients?
So self-regulation, that's the most important tool that you as an individual have, for yourself, for being out in the world. And by that, I mean, when you get triggered, the ability to bring yourself back to neutral. When you're highly in any kind of unsavory state,
Mm-hmm.
you have the ability to get back to neutral, within reason. If we're
Yeah.
talking about an emotional or an energetic trigger.
Yeah.
So, not like, no, we're not going to go into the negative examples, but yeah.
Like, how
So,
quickly can you get back to baseline? How quickly can you get back to maybe that parasympathetic state? Or would that be a fair?
yeah, a really good
Okay.
question. And I think the most correct answer would be depends on the level of the trigger.
Yeah.
Um, but the biggest and most important tool or step is awareness.
Yeah.
And knowing that you want to be back in a state that you feel like you have a level of autonomy, not like you've been swept away by your emotion or by the situation, or it might be a justified reaction, but you not wanting to be there. Like, I want to feel um that, like, I have agency over myself.
Yeah. And I want to say here too, of I heard this years ago,
Mhm.
and I thought, or I interpreted it as, I need to get back to how I was feeling before I was triggered as quickly as possible. And what
Mhm.
I want to encourage everyone is that is not to bypass what you are feeling. Like, I'll give you guys an example. Like the other night, there was a conversation that Jason and I, my husband and I had, right? And then he went and did the exact opposite of what we had talked about. And so in that moment, right, I was upset. And so if I was trying to hurry up and push myself to get back to baseline, I wasn't ready to get back to baseline, right? I wanted to feel angry. I wanted to feel upset
Mhm.
because that is the emotion that I was experiencing. And I think sometimes we hear, you know, we
Mhm.
hear these things and then we use it against ourselves
Mhm.
versus to enhance our lives. We use it as another tool or weaponry
Yeah.
against us. Like, well, I shouldn't be mad. It's like, no, you absolutely should be mad, because that is the emotion that's coming up and out of you in this moment, right? And so what I want to encourage each of you is to be aware of what is the emotion, or what, I mean, you don't even have to know the emotion. It's just like, where is the sensation in your body that you're feeling this, and allow for this to come up and out. Like, he said, like, do you want to talk? And I'm like, absolutely not right now. I want to be mad. Let me be mad. Right. And we've worked on that, right? Like, it's okay to be mad. It's okay to feel anger. And so allowing yourself to have these emotions and then feel them, work through them, allow them, release them, and then come back to. So it's not a like, oh, I feel this way, I need to hurry up and get back here. It's, I
Yeah.
feel this way. I want to feel what I need to feel, release what needs to be released, seen, hear what needs to be, all of it, right? And then I can get back to my
100%.
regulation. Yeah.
These things happen in phases, in levels, in steps. And if we're honest with ourselves, we don't love hearing that. We would like to be fixed, healed, back to where we need to be immediately. Immediately. Can we have that happen? We can, for it to be sustainable. I don't think so.
Yeah.
It is going to always be a process. So this is a good, like, this is a good thing to start working on, things like self-grace and patience, you know? And at the same time, you're going to feel a difference, because this is how this modality works. And it's going to be maybe jarring or surprising at first, but that's just because we're not used to talking about energy healing
Yeah.
or the energetic layer. And that's what's missing. And earlier you had said, like, did you say like a fast track or what did you say that EFT
Yeah, like
provided?
we want to like, oh, it's just a way to bypass, like we bypass the mind and we just get to the body. I think, yeah, I think I said fast track, right? Like,
Okay.
yeah, it's a
Yeah.
fast track way to get to the body.
Hmm. Yeah. And it speeds up the healing because you're addressing all parts of you. So even though it seems like something silly, like oh, I'm just tapping on myself and saying something, but then you're like, oh, I feel better, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
And it works that way because you're bringing the pieces together. It's like connecting circuitry literally, and then just seeing the whole board light up. That's what's happening, you know? So when can we use it? Whenever we want.
Mhm.
How do we do it? So tapping, especially if you're new to it, we can keep it very simple.
Okay.
And so literally you would just be tapping all 10 fingers together. And so I said, oh, it's easy. But then I get a little OCD about it where you want to make sure that you're tapping with some oomph, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Oomph in there. And you want to see if you can get the very tops of the fingers tapping together. You want to make sure your pinky and your thumbs are in the process. So this is option A.
Mm-hmm.
Then you got option B, which we could call the karate chop point. So you make like a kind of like hand, and then you're just tapping on the pinky side edge. And then you have the third option, which is to do the body tapping. You're running the gamut. And so what we're doing is we're catching kind of like all the hot spots in the top half of the body. And when you run the gamut, you're actually hitting the hot spots. When you're tapping with the fingertips, just finger tapping, it's kind of a catch-all where, because all of the meridians, they end in the fingertips. This is why that works so well. And that's why this also works so well. So I would always recommend this if you're just getting started. However, we can go through the actual gamut of the tapping points. How do you feel about doing that?
Yeah. Sure.
Okay. So you start at the top of the head, like the crown of the head, and you can use both,
Mm-hmm.
or you can use one or the other hand.
Okay.
And then there are going to be some spots where it's awkward to use both hands, but you start at the top. You just do it for a breath or two. Then you're going to move to right above your eyebrow. Just a second. And so Erin's doing it with, oh, she's doing it with one hand. You can do it with one or both. It doesn't matter. The effect is going to be felt on both sides. Then you're going to come to your temple. There you go. And then a little bit more gently under the eye.
And just so for everyone that's listening that you're not watching on YouTube, like you're not doing it super hard, but you're for sure like tapping enough to where like you feel it, you know?
Yeah. And then you're going to come to the philtrum, Cupid's bow. So right underneath the nose.
Mm-hmm.
That little soft dip spot. And then you're going to go to the chin. And then you're just doing like a mid-tempo tapping, 10 or so taps. We've probably done 20 by now. And then you're going to locate your collarbones, like that area, but it's going to be that dip. There's like a little soft spot there. That's what you're tapping on there. Then you're going to find a rib cage. So like right at the breastbone.
I always say like underneath my bra strap for women, right? Like, is that,
Well,
oh, you're going to your breastbone first. Okay.
So,
like your sternum?
sternum, yes. And
Yeah,
then
okay.
underneath, like the armpit. So
yeah,
bra,
the armpit or the bra. Mm-hmm.
And so that's it. And then you start again at the top of the head.
So let's dive into, because you start off when you're doing this, and I always advise or suggest, I should say, that if you're new to EFT, work with someone, and if Noelle resonates with you, reach out to Noelle, but like work with someone for a couple of times to get you to understand like where are you tapping and getting the feeling and like the actual process of doing it. And so I think a lot of times what holds people up is because when you start tapping, you actually start tapping and saying, and I'm air quoting, the negative parts, right? The things that
You don't want to
like you
say.
can, yeah, that you don't want to say. Thank you. I'm like, what is the word I want to use? Yeah, that you don't want to say. So like, let's say we can use my example for last week, right? Like I was saying, uh, like what were some of the things that we were saying so that people can understand? Like it was about saying what I wanted to say, feeling love no matter who, like feeling safe to say what I want to say, even if people disagree, right? Like that's kind of what we tapped on. So
Yeah.
some of the like let's just use a, what would be the air quotes negative things that I wouldn't want to uh that I would want to start with, and that
Yeah.
sometimes we don't necessarily want to say, because I think we've been taught in the self-development world, right? Like, oh, well, don't focus on the negative, don't focus on the negative vibration, stay positive, stay blah. And that is true long term, right? That is true as a baseline emotion. If you are feeling fear, if you are feeling anger, if you are feeling stress, if you are feeling resentment on a consistent basis, then what that does to your body and your cells and what you are attracting is going to be more of that.
Yeah.
And also, in order to clear and let go of some of that in your subconscious, you say those things to release them. So the things that I was focusing on from a negative, I'm trying to remember, like what were we talking about from a negative, air quotes, I'm saying negative because I don't believe in positive or negative, but like a vibration wise, right? Like the energy that was holding was a lower vibration emotion. So like, did I
So
say like, what was I saying?
basically, you weren't wanting to revel in a good feeling moment while other people's situations
Yes.
are not
Yeah.
as good.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So whatever comes up in your head, the mean girl version of us in our head, when we think we have that moment, something happened throughout the day and we find ourselves just ruminating on it, ruminating like, why did I do that? Why did I do that? Why can I say this? That mean girl is who you want to have the microphone when you start. And
Mm.
so start, even though, and then you just you bring up the word vomit, you bring up like the irrationality of the situation and how you're feeling. And like Erin was saying, this is really triggering, but this is the whole point. We do want to feel the trigger and give it some validation, let it
Mm.
come up to the surface. That's the first step of changing it. So in that situation, some things were like, I don't want to talk about this, and I can't really say what I'm thinking because who
Yeah.
am I to feel this way, you know?
Yeah.
Who am I to
Yep.
have this situation? I can't say, oh, well, my life is perfect or my life is great. So things like that. Just the fears that you're having running in the mind,
Mm.
this is your time to speak them out. And so what I've been saying to clients lately is we're always going to have, especially if you are more cerebral, you do resonate with the mental energy more. And if you've been doing, your fair share of healing work, we get into this, oh, puppies and rainbows, like kind of nice. It wasn't so bad, I can't say how I really feel. Like it's a very therapeutic, nice cover up. We're trying to make the situation nicer because we have an understanding. We're like, yeah, we know that that person probably had a bad day and a bad start, and they're not a terrible human being. You don't want to do that in tapping. That's not what we're doing here. You really want to give yourself permission to get
Mm.
a little irrational, a
Upset.
little,
Upset.
like upset, like your 5-year-old self.
Yeah.
So you're going to forget the intellect that you are now, the rational human being, and you want to take it back to the 5-year-old fear, because that is what is causing you to still be triggered right now. That part of
Yes.
it that didn't get dealt with back then.
Absolutely.
You just say whatever comes up that even feels scary to say. And this is an important piece with tapping. You just say what you feel. I don't even want to talk about this. I don't want to do this. This is stupid. This is not going to work. Tapping my fingers together, this is not working. You say what's coming up. And so a big part of this is resistance.
Mm.
And the way resistance works, it's very sneaky. It's a very sophisticated system within us that we don't really know we have, and knows us very well. So as you're tapping, this is another reason why we're like, just tap here so you can concentrate on the verbiage and putting your energy toward finding whatever you need to say these things out loud, these scary things that you don't want anyone to know that you're thinking. Just say them, but that takes so much energy. So you want to focus there because there is going to be resistance. You're trying to heal and get over something, and your resistance is like, no, that's not safe. That's new territory. We don't do new. Yeah, she thinks it's safe. We don't know. We don't know. We could get hit by a bus by doing this tapping thing. We're not doing it. We don't know what's going to happen. So we want to speak that. Whatever is coming up for you, you speak it, and I don't want to sound like an insensitive bitch. You speak it with the tapping.
Yep.
And then I deeply love and accept myself anyways, which I know how it sounds. But we want to consider that, again, this is not supposed to make sense to our rationale. We want it to make the part of us that's still hurt and stuck and does not feel like it's safe to be seen.
Yeah, because the 5-year-old, the 7-year-old, the 10-year-old, the 12-year-old, whatever age it is, that wasn't okay to feel what they needed to feel, right? Like we are, like you said, bypassing the mind, bypassing that conscious and getting into the subconscious, getting into the body, getting into that little kid that wasn't validated, wasn't seen, wasn't heard, and you are doing that for yourself now. And so yeah.
And so to really have like a successful tapping session, it's not super complicated. You want to tap your fingers together, take a deep breath, and be honest with yourself first. Honest with yourself, honest about the situation. Do you know that meme of the dog sitting in the burning flames and he's just like, it's fine. It's fine. Do you know that? That one, he's just like drinking his coffee, and we're not doing that in tapping. Not at first. You want to really give those flames some attention. I don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm stuck in traffic, and I told my mom I was going to be on time this time, and now I'm late, and she's going to hate me forever. I'm such a terrible daughter. You just let all the things, even though they don't make sense, come up. And I deeply love and accept myself anyways. And I want to know what it feels like too. And then you put in what you want to happen. And I want to know what it feels like to forgive myself for this. I want to know what it feels like to connect to my body. I want to know what it feels like to give this a try. I want to know what it feels like to love myself. I want to know what it feels like to not punch this guy in the face. Whatever it is, whatever you can reach for, that's how you start your practice with yourself. You keep it short, you keep it punchy, you keep it sweet, you keep it real. It's not about perfection. It's not about hitting all the marks. It's about waking up a part of your body and connecting with yourself in this new way that's really going to start liberating you from things that you need to get liberated from.
Yeah. I always say, like, when we want to put a Band-Aid on shit, it's like still shit underneath the Band-Aid, right? Like we actually need to and Noelle's like waving her hand, like, and it smells too. It's like we have to let those parts of us be seen, right? Like it will continue to, if it's not this specific circumstance, then it's going to keep happening until you're able to see it and able to, they always say, bring it to the light, or to expose it, or to, see it and feel it, because it is begging to come up and out. It's just, we don't give it the time. We don't give it the space. We don't value those parts of us that weren't seen. And so, I always say, like, to each of you, like, you have to play with this, right? Like there is no right or wrong way. It is just to physically, get that, like you're saying, the meridian part, like tapping, just to keep it simple, just tap, like what Noelle says, is just tap with your fingers, right? Like all your fingertips together, just tap, and then just say it, right? And then do this and then check in with your body, like, how do I feel, and some of the things that, Noelle, you can elaborate on this, but like for me, I typically cry, I
Mhm.
typically yawn, burping is what happens a lot.
Mhm.
But first and foremost, it's always crying, because it's like seeing that part, like that's, I think for me, like the crying happens first, and then as I've released that, then it's the yawning is typically the energy that moves, or the burping. But that initial is always tears. Tears
Mhm.
fall.
And not to give
And
that.
and yeah, I mean, and that's the thing, right? Like, is allowing the tears to fall. Like, we want to cry because we haven't allowed ourselves to cry. Like, the joke in my house with my husband years ago was like, my wife never cries. Like, what are all these women crying? Like, my wife never cries. And it's like, yeah, because I was just shoving everything down, right? Didn't give myself the space or the time to cry, or allowed myself to cry. But then once I realized, like, oh wow, like I've got a lot of stuff that needs to come up
Yeah.
and out, right? Like, crying all the time. Like, we cry because we feel love. We cry because I'm angry and frustrated. We cry because I feel hurt, right? Like, it's okay to cry. Like, it is. I always tell my kid, like, why do we think crying or pooping is any different than yawning? It's just because we have a story around yawning
Mm.
over crying or pooping. It's all a bodily function and sensation, right?
Yeah.
And so allowing the tears to fall, like they're meant to. I always say, like, if we're you cannot keep your emotions are like a beach ball. If you're going to try to keep and hold the beach ball underwater, at some point it has to come up, right?
Mhm.
So giving yourself, here we go back to worthiness, right? You're worthy
Mhm.
of feeling what needs to be felt. You're worthy of 20 minutes of you and yourself allowing these emotions to come up. You're worthy of the feelings that you're feeling, right? It's okay to be upset about XYZ, because that was probably something that wasn't okay when you were younger.
Yeah. Um, Going back to being afraid of these things,
Mhm.
wanting
Mhm.
to allow the tears or whatever else comes up. Here's the thing about connecting to the body and about um, tapping specifically, and more about the non-physical part of our bodies connecting with physical. Your body is only going to present something to be worked on that it is ready to be worked on.
Mm.
Body's a part of this team. I know some of you don't believe me. Some of you feel like your bodies are out to get you, but they're not.
Yeah.
They are not. And if it's coming up for you, if you find yourself with Erin or me, it's probably like you're ready to do this work. And so even if it feels scary because you're like, oh, I'm going to get overwhelmed. I'm going to end up crying the entire day. I'm not going to be able to handle it. You will. Even in the moments, the throes of it, you're like, no, I'm going to die. You're not going to die. It feels that way. But if it's coming up for you, it's because you're ready. Your body is not trying to ambush you. Sometimes I think it's the other way around with that
Yeah.
mind body, you know?
Yeah.
Um, and if you are like, I want to trust what you're saying, but I can't, you're like, even though I don't trust what these women are saying, I want to know what it feels like to try it out. This is what it's about. Just getting used to trying something new.
Yes.
I want to know what it feels like to try something new and it'd be okay.
Yeah.
That's the
This
first
is this is what I always say is like, are you willing, right? Like,
step.
it's not that somebody else has more courage than you, or is different than you, or more special than you. Like, it is none of that. It's just, where is our level of willingness? And some of us in the beginning, it's not that much. And that's okay, right? Like, knowing where your level of willingness is, knowing, where is your, and I've talked about this on previous podcasts, like window of tolerance, basically, like what can your nervous system handle, right? Like, in simplest terms, like if you've never walked up to a stranger before and asked them for a phone number, that might be outside your window of tolerance, right? For me, my family thinks I talk too much to everyone. Like, my window of tolerance in that regards isn't, that wouldn't be outside my comfort zone, right? And so it's not a problem. It's just, are you more practiced, right? In feeling these emotions, in doing these things. And but my window of tolerance, like we talk about money, right? Like my window of tolerance was using my funds. For some people, that might be like, that's no problem at all. What are you so bothered by? It's like, but that was my
Wound.
wound for sure. And that was my, oh goodness, like, that was outside my comfort zone, way
Mm,
outside my comfort zone, right? And so it's just like, where is our comfort zone? We want to go a little bit outside, right? We do want to stretch it just a little bit, but not so much that it just shuts us down. So maybe if you're starting and you're learning what this is, maybe it's just a minute of doing this, right?
a
Seeing what
minute,
it feels like,
30 seconds.
dipping your toe in just a little bit. Like, what is this about? Like, maybe it's just like you looking up more YouTube videos and like researching what this is, right? Like, so it's where are you along the journey of like, okay, where am I willing? What am I willing to explore and look at? And also giving yourself the time and the space to feel what needs to be felt when it comes up.
Yeah. Yes. I like to say, not because it's a fun thing to say, but it's true. It took us a while to get where we are,
Mm,
dissatisfied as we are, you know?
yeah.
So most of the times it's gonna take more than, tapping a couple times. It's gonna take more than a couple weeks, some of us have been doing this for decades,
Yeah.
you know? And this is not to be discouraging. It's that you are making the little small steps that you need to be making, you know?
I think
R-
that's a really good point because I've had people ask me that are 50, 60, 70 years, right? Like, oh my gosh, if I've got 60 years of anger, is it going to take 60 years of anger, for me to release it? And my answer is always probably not, right? Like, no, for sure, no. And also, we are a human being, right?
Mhm.
In a body that has emotion. So when you're doing this work, you are going to there is maybe going to be more of a time period, right, where you may feel more anger. And
Yeah.
also, but you're not going to be angry all the time for the rest of your life in order to release it, right? Or there might be sadness, but that's all natural, air quotes, whatever normal is, right? Like that's just part of the process because you have to think about how many years of sadness you haven't seen, felt,
Mhm.
allowed to be there, right? And so it's not going to take you the same amount of time that it took you to have it all. And also, yeah, like Noelle's saying, and it's also not going to be like, okay, I've done 2 taps and I'm done.
Right. And this is where it comes back to connecting with the body and beginning to be empowered by knowing yourself.
Hmm.
Some people super, super intimidating and scary, and I get it. But it's because of that like specificity that Erin is talking about, where it's gonna be different windows of tolerance for each person. And so it is gonna slow you down a little bit if you're caught up in, oh, well, I should be doing this, I should be
Mhm.
getting these results because Noelle Satisfies Soul says that I should be seeing results right here today at 2 p.m. You know, that's not going to be as accurate as the intel, the data from my data loving people. That's what you're collecting from your body. It has so much rich data about who you are, how you trap emotions, how you get um, triggered, all of that, and how you release things. It just takes some rediverted attention towards self. And again, I get why that's scary because we've been taught we can't do that. That's selfish. We need to be about everybody else. But it's super important to get to
Yeah,
you.
and oh, sorry, go ahead, Noelle.
And that's it.
Yeah, I mean, when you're thinking about the should, when you're thinking about all that, you're thinking, right? You're not in your body. And so noticing, like celebrating that awareness, oh, here I am and shoulding. Okay. that is all mental. That is not the point of EFT. It is to feel the emotions and be there. So just even noticing that, like, okay, I'm in my shoulds again,
Yes.
celebrating. Okay, this is what my mind likes to do. But the whole point is to be in my body, to feel what it feels.
And even if it's like, okay, this feels uncomfortable. I
Yeah.
and then I also want you to ask, so what does discomfort feel like? This is another
Mm.
thing about getting into the body and allowing and having the mind help. This is not about not thinking
Yeah.
or existing without the mind.
Yep.
It's about the connectivity, all of you together, you know? And so it's a good practice to, okay, I'm anxious. I'm really anxious right now. This talk is making me uncomfortable. Okay. So we have those kind of like surface level mind descriptive words. I
Yeah.
want you to start turning them into feeling words like adjectives, hot, cold. Is that a tingle sensation? Does it feel heavy? Where is it feeling? Okay, how do I know I'm anxious? Is it because my chest is tight? You know, you want to get descriptive, not, oh, this is anxiety. What does anxiety feel like in your body? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
That's a really good practice for allowing the mind to get into the body, you know, because you're giving your mind the task of coming up with these descriptives. Does it make you think of a color? But you're focusing in the body.
And it's so important to, you're saying like, I'm feeling, it's just, I am feeling anxious. You are not, I am not anxious, right? I am not sad. It's just, we are experiencing these feelings in our bodies in this moment. And so allowing some of that separation, right? It's not who you are. Sadness isn't who you are. Anger is not who you are. It's just you're a human being feeling these sensations. And like Noelle's saying, right? Like it feels tight in my body right now. It feels tightness in my chest, or it feels very closed off in my chest right now. Or my face and my neck is getting really hot. Or like Noelle's saying, is like, what are those feelings? What is that sensation? What are those, yeah, like you're saying, all that descriptor, so you can kind of um give it some space, I guess, if that be a good way to describe it. Like give it some space of like, you, it's almost like you're kind of higher up looking down. That's the way I kind of view it, right? Like, oh, what's going on down here versus like I'm in it, and this isn't
Right.
me. It's just an experience that I'm having right now.
Really well said. It is a difference of like perspective
Yeah.
and noticing that separation. I am not sadness. I am not anxiety. You know, I'm experiencing a moment that's making me a little anxious or a lot anxious, you
Yeah.
know. I'm
Yeah.
experiencing some anger. Now you don't have to walk around being like, I am experiencing anger, you know? But it's like you do want to do that separation, you know? You are you, the capital Y. I was gonna say with a capital U. I had to think about that. The capital Y, and you move through these cycles of things, these cycles of emotion. And they're there to tell you about just
Mm.
how I'm about to geek out, but amazingly knocked together and amazingly calibrated you as an individual are. It is so mind blowing and it's very on purpose. And these things, these emotions, these things that you're going through are here to tell you something.
Yeah.
And so you want to think of EFT and tapping as a tool to get some more information, like get
Mm.
some more of the tea, like what is happening with me, you know? Not from a what's wrong with you. It's I want to
Mm.
understand you
Yeah.
being, you know?
Mm.
So yeah, it's a lot. We can talk about this for
I love it because I always say, like, I didn't used to think this way, but our body is our only home. It's the only home we'll ever have. Right.
yeah,
And so being so loving towards it. And if that's a stretch, you could even just start with like, I had to be like, I have a body.
I have a body.
All of humanity has a body, right? Like I couldn't go to like, I hate myself to I love myself, right? Here we go back to window of tolerance, too much of a stretch for my nervous system. But I was like, you know what? can't argue with, I got a body, here it is, right? And so, just noticing and allowing that we do have a body. It is so intelligent. It is here for us. It is our home, and giving it the time and the space and the love, right? That I would say that it needs, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it feels good, right? Here's the thing, and I said this on other podcasts and I say this all the time. It's not that being loving to yourself is the right way, air quotes, and that beating yourself up is the wrong way, air quotes.
Yeah.
It's just that it feels really, really good in your body when you love yourself, when you talk lovingly to yourself, when you allow yourself to cry when you need to cry, when you hold yourself, because that probably might not have happened to you when you were littler, right? Like, it just feels better. And so you, the listener, right? You just get to play with it. You get to see, like, does it feel better? Do I want to continue to do this? Right? Like, I always say, like, there's no right or wrong. It's just, here are some ideas for you to explore and what feels good for you.
Yeah. And I just hear, even though I can hear you guys, but I hear someone out there thinking, yeah, but do I deserve to feel good? You do.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
You
you
do.
do.
And it is such a problem. We've really done some work on ourselves in this day and age where we are as a species, where we don't believe in our own deserving or worth. And if you think that's not affecting how you're showing up in the world, oh boy, is it, And this is why you would want to use this technique. Even if saying to yourself, oh, I'm worthy of this, or I deserve this, is if that is too much of a stretch, like you were saying earlier, Erin, you take it in chunks. There is tapping verbiage that says, I deeply love and accept myself anyway. And I can see people struggle with that line alone.
Mm-hmm.
And if that is you, you add in, even if I don't, even
Mm.
if I don't today, because
Mm.
again, you're getting okay, you're getting comfortable with speaking what's there,
Mm.
and that's really important if you want to then get over it. We're
I
not
love
going to
that.
like fake positivity
No.
thing. We're not doing that.
Yeah.
We have to address how it's showing up for you specifically for us to get you specifically the relief that you specifically need.
Yeah.
So it's so important to just speak what's there. If you're not loving yourself in the moment, and I want to know what it feels like, because don't you? Don't you want to know what it feels like to love yourself? If you don't know what that feels like right now, I want to know what that feels like.
Mm.
I hear that it's nice. I want to
Mm.
experience that.
Mm.
Whatever you can reach for is good enough that day.
Mm.
Tap your fingers together. Even though I don't want to do this, I don't want to get out of bed today. I deeply love and accept myself anyways. Even if I don't,
Mm.
maybe next week I will want to deeply love and accept myself anyways. I know this is triggering for some people to hear, but again, it's taking one baby step forward instead of trying to take on too much at once. That doesn't feel authentic.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh, I love that. And I always say, like, we have more than five senses, but our five senses, right? Like, it's for pleasure. It's for fun. It's, like, we use our nose to smell beautiful things. We have vision to, like, see amazing things that bring us pleasure, and taste and touch and hearing, right? Like, all of it, and our emotions is for pleasure. It is for fun. And so, like you said, I mean, we've been brought up at, like, that struggle, and that, like, our bodies, like you're saying, in this intuitiveness, is like, when we are feeling those lower vibration emotions, that is telling us that we are off course, right? Like, because we are sent here to have fun, to feel pleasure, to, I got body chills just saying it, like, just feeling good, right? We're meant to feel good. And so it's our little flashlight, right? To be like, I'm off course, right? Like, if I'm frustrated, like, I think about Erin 4 years ago, frustration was probably my primary emotion I felt on a daily basis.
Yeah.
That was showing me, some things are off, right? We're not on course with what we came here for. So
It's terribly important. so important to just know and being able to tell what's going on with you. There's just so much data there.
So much data. Yeah. We're laughing because Zoom keeps freezing. Okay. So, is there anything else that you want to say or you haven't said that I haven't asked you or that you want to comment on?
Give it a go.
Hmm.
If you're skeptical, you're literally just tapping your fingers together.
Yeah.
See how it feels.
Yeah.
Ask someone to do it with you, perhaps.
Hmm.
You
Hmm.
know, give yourself the opportunity to try something that might shift something for you. If it doesn't work, even though it
You can
will.
always go back. You can always go back.
You want to.
Yeah.
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 So that's the only thing I would say.
Oh, Noelle, thank you so much. We'll probably have another podcast on worthiness, deserving, and all of the things.
Oh, yeah. That's gonna have to be
So,
like a week-long event.
so tell everyone where can they find you, learn about you. What would you love to share?
You can find me at worthinessembodied.com.
Okay.
I am on Instagram at Noelle Satisfies Souls. There's not much to see there right now, but stay tuned.
Yeah.
See what's going on there.
Okay. I'll put it all in the show notes. And yeah, thank you so much for all of your time, all of your knowledge, all of it. Of course.